All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here are doing our full Week 1 breakdown for the 2024 college football season, kicking things off in style. A lot of these big games you'll see here, we've broken down in full and in much clearer detail. So, go through the channel to find those, as we're not going to add as much context to our picks. And of course, that starts with a major top 15 showdown in Atlanta. Number 1, Georgia, essentially hosting at number 14, Clemson. Clemson, plus 14 right now. I think they're going to cover that line. I just think this roster is too talented for the Tigers, and I think the books are seeing that the Clemson offense might just be incredibly stagnant against a very good Georgia defense, led by a great run-stopping unit. Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse, of course, in the middle. Smale Munnon, if he plays. Guys like C.J. Allen, Michael Williams. Just incredible amounts of talent in the front seven that's certainly going to allow Georgia to, upend Phil Maffa, who was a physical runner, who could still, overpower in short yardage and goal line situations. But I think the thing for Clemson is they have Garrett Riley. He's been prepping this game plan for a while. Cade Klepnick, a former 5-star. It's time for him to live up to that billing. And a wide receiver group that's got, a good amount of talent all of a sudden. Jake Bringston at tight end, who said, we're not an underdog. We're just kind of flying under the radar here. And I think that's great. Tyler Brown, a guy who you're going to look to see the ball in his hands a lot, especially on the perimeter. I think out wide with Antonio Williams, his hands as well. Brown more so his athletic ability. I think they're going to be able to, have winning matchups, Nick, with these wide receivers. It's going to allow this offense to, be able to keep pace in this contest. And of course, on the other side of the ball, UGA's offense, they're incredibly tough to cover in the middle of the field. They're great off play action. So you have, some tackles that are going to have tough asks going against guys like Peter Woods and TJ Parker. And of course, Barrett Carter at linebacker. A lot of young players that are very good in the secondary. You got to be able to contain this physical ground game. Looks like Roderick Robinson's not going to play in this contest. ETN is questionable to be decided at this point. So, maybe you can get a little bit of an assist there. Need to slow down the run, though, for Clemson. You'll have a good chance, and I think that Clemson's going to be able to do that to a good enough tune while this offense will be able to create a little bit. So, Nick, I'm going to go with Clemson to cover. Can they win this game outright? Of course they can. Will they? I'd be significantly shocked, and that's someone that is probably the highest of anybody in the country right now in Clemson, that being me. I would be shocked if they won this game outright.
I'm pretty high on this Clemson Tigers team as well. I think this team is severely underrated in the grand scheme of college football. I think they were very underrated, prior to the Florida State loss. Everyone was picking Florida State to win the ACC, but you and I both picked Clemson. You and I are both high on this Tigers team and Dabo and his resume. He's still an incredible coach and has a great roster here. I think they're going to be extremely competitive in this game. I think this is a matchup that really does have some favorable benefits for them. I like what they have on offense here. I think, Cade Klubnik is finally coming around and getting closer to being that quarterback you thought he was going to be out of high school. I like what the weapons he have. I think Bringston is an incredible tight end who will be a massive difference maker this year. Expect a lot of targets for the tight end this year. I look at the wide receiver room. I think they have some incredible pieces that could really work out. You rattled off some of the names there. I think Maffa's still an incredible back that can lead the way for this offense. Where you look at the defense for Clemson, Peter Woods coming off the edge is an incredibly talented player who was a high-ranking 5-star out of high school. A lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball. They have really good talent on the defensive line. They have really nice depth overall. I think it's a good defensive unit that will be able to keep Georgia in check early on. I think Georgia's kind of underestimating Clemson here a little bit with the spread. I'm taking Clemson with the points. I'll take UGA to win outright, but I think it'll be a closer game, within double digit, probably, 9-10 points, something like that. I like what Clemson has in their secondary. I think it's a veteran unit that's got some good experience. I think the middle of the defense is really strong as well. Georgia, they're certainly going to be an incredible team this year. They certainly have a lot of talent and a lot of depth, but I think there's some question marks with the running back room. What is that offense going to look like on the ground? Is Beck going to be as good as he was last year? I certainly think so, but he has a bit of a reduced wide receiver room with some less talent. The defense, the defense is going to be good, but some of these guys do have to step up, especially the defensive line, who had a bit of a weaker year last year against the run. Can they get to the previous levels of the Kirby Smart era? This is a big matchup for both teams, sets a big precedent for both teams. If Clemson wins this game, it certainly shakes up all of college football. If Georgia wins this game and it's close, I think that makes a big statement for both teams about what direction they're heading.
And of course, Carson Beck's going to be a big X factor in that one. Want to see how he does against this great defense. A lot we're going to find out in that contest. Don't expect it to just be a cakewalk, though, for the Bulldogs. Looking also going down at noon on Fox, West Virginia hosting top 10 Penn State, an opportunity to really, get a head start in the college football playoff discussion for the Mountaineers. Great rushing attack. Garrett Green's one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the country. This is a team that had a lot of young players last year step up, especially in the wide receiver group. Jaheim White at running back emerged out of nowhere late in the year, and he ended up being the leading rusher of 842 yards. C.J. Donaldson behind him, 800 yards, 11 touchdowns, and of course Green, 770. plus rushing in a 13 score. So this is a phenomenal rushing attack. I think it was fourth nationally they were last year. Now going against the number one ranked run defense in college football from a season ago, a team that's only going to get better up front as Abdul Carter shifts down to the defensive end position, opposite of denied Dennis Sutton. Obviously, Wyatt Millum, a great left tackle. He's going to be key in this matchup. You certainly expect him to be good. So what are they going to throw at him in terms of stunts and blitzes and whatnot to try and throw him off? It's going to be hard, but I think it's going to be a great chess match. And they're incredibly deep on their defensive line with veteran players Zane Durant, Keziah Izzard, Hakeem Beamon, just to name a few. Great run defense here. And of course, the reason why this line's so close and why people think West Virginia can win is because what's the Penn State offense going to do that seems relatively weak on the offensive line, especially on the interior, even though they have some more veterans there now in terms of experience. Guys like Sal Wormley, Ola Iona should be better in games like this. They're going up against, an average West Virginia front. Drew Aller, of course, protected the ball a lot last year. You want to see him take some more risks this year now that they have a guy in Julian Fleming. Tyler Warren's a great tight end. Other than that, who's going to step up? They're going to be able to expose a secondary that has a lot of transfers with the speed of, Harrison Wallace, Caden Sanders. And, of course, what were they able to do in terms of running the ball? Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, these guys split head touches right down the middle. But obviously the balance with this offense has not been ideal. They just lack significant athletic ability, it seems, and speed, Nick. I think Penn State covers because I think this defense is going to be all over West Virginia, who I think they're great, especially for their conference. The offensive line's a very good unit, but in terms of Big Ten physicality, don't think they're prepared for it. My final score was 26-17. The line's 8.5 right now, so that's really cutting it close. If you can go and get it at 9, I'll pick them the cover, or even 10 if you can find it somewhere. I'll call them the cover in that regard. Obviously, the line's still moving, Nick, but I think 9-point loss, that's my final prediction. So that will be whatever the line is. That's who I'm taking the cover.
So I was unavailable for the episode where you previewed this game individually, but I'm going to pick West Virginia, which might come as a shock for some people, but I'll defend my pick in a second here. This game is extremely hyped down there in Morgantown, one of the biggest games to be played on that campus in a very long time. It's the most expensive ticket in college football for the first weekend of the season. This ticket is selling like absolute hotcakes. People want to go see this team play in West Virginia. They're having the Pat McAfee show, noted alumni. Pat McAfee is hosting his show on campus all during the week, getting the fans fired up. I trust that atmosphere to be absolutely rocking. We've seen West Virginia win big games in the past, and I really think what they have on offense is what's going to lead their way here. Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson's incredible 1-2 punch, one of the most talented, absolute, incredibly dominant running back duos in the country. I really love what they have, and then you partner in that with Garrett Green, who is absolutely phenomenal on the ground as well, really strong legs. That's a crazy trio right there that's going to be absolute dominant on the ground. Yes, Penn State is incredible run defense. I certainly know that. I do like what they have. I think they've moved enough pieces around to have that run defense be absolutely phenomenal. But I think this offensive line is quite physical for West Virginia as well. I think it's a good unit that will be able to stand up on their own. I like what they have at wide receiver. I think Hudson Clement and Preston Fox are two really talented players. When they do have to go through the air, this offense I think is absolute dynamite. I just think that we've seen Penn State's offense disappoint in previous games against big time opponents. Now, of course, I know those opponents were tougher opponents than West Virginia, but we've seen this script before where Penn State just struggles on offense. They have a lot of kinks, they're not able to figure it out, and they struggle. I expect them to do that in this game. Drew Aller has struggled. Yes, he's a talented player, but he hasn't quite hit the heights yet. Great at protecting the ball, great completion percentage, but has not been able to get the touchdown numbers up or the pure yard numbers up. Nicholas Singleton and Ketron Allen are two really incredibly talented players at running back that he relies on a lot, and this offense will rely on a lot. But I don't know exactly how strong of a day they're going to have against a front that I like for West Virginia. I do like what this defense has. Bringing in Julian Fleming was a solid add, a good wide receiver to bring out of the portal, a guy that got a bad shake at Ohio State. As for the defense, Penn State does have a really strong defense. Danny's Dennis Sutton, I like him a lot. Abdul Carter coming off the edge certainly is a difference maker throughout the season. Cam Miller at cornerback, I like him a lot as well. Tony Rojas and Kobe King at linebacker are two incredibly talented players. I feel like West Virginia's going to have a really good day in the trenches and a really good day on the ground with the crowd behind them. Play at their own tempo, play at their own pace, run the ball, and do what they have to do. I like what this defense has. I think Sean Martin's an incredible player coming off the edge. Josiah Trotter, I like him at linebacker. Trey Latham, also solid. Aubrey Burks is a really incredibly player that they can move around, is a bit versatile. You can get a lot out of him. I like West Virginia to win this game. Upset, I'm going 24-20, something like that. I think this is a game that's going to be one of those games that kind of shocks you quickly. Penn State, they've known to disappoint in these big games. I think that trend's going to continue.
Now looking at ESPN, the cap off the noon slate, Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt, 13.5-point line. And if BetMGM's correct, 65% of the money is coming in on the doors to cover. Very interesting. This is a Virginia Tech team. It's a very obvious sleeper team. mean, they're not even a sleeper team at this point because they get so much production back on both sides of the ball, led by Kyron Drones. Really sparked a different attitude for this offense. Brayshawn Tootin, of course, at running back is a tremendously explosive player. Ollie Jennings, they're getting him back after being injured all of last year. Jalen Lane, Daquan Felton. I mean, this is a very stacked offense. Everyone's back on the offensive line as well, so that experience will pay dividends for them. Going up against a Vanderbilt defense that has just been abysmal. 129th in scoring last year. They were 129th against the pass, 131st in terms of total yards per game. Clark Leah, of course, a bit of a defensive guru, just really struggling to get things, really positivity, I guess you could say, on this side of the ball. They only get back 4 starters. I do like some of the transfers they added on the defensive side of the ball. Zaylen Wood, Corday Snyder, those guys are very sound. Returning C.J. Taylor at safety is very impressive. But you got a couple of transfers and maybe even a true freshman that gets involved in their secondary. So a lot of youth there. The defense, Nick, again, you can be an expertise all you want, but at schools like this, it's very difficult. And I think this is a team that a lot of people think can compete in this contest because it is an SEC school at the end of the day. Diego Pavia coming over is a really good dual-threat player with his offensive coordinator, Tim Beck. But for the most part, they couldn't run the ball last year. All their wide receivers they had that were actually very talented transferred out. So this is a team, not much is working for them. I know that seems like a trendy pick where they can cover and probably lose this game by 10 points or so. I think Vanderbilt may do that. This is an opportunity for the Hokies to make a statement, end the year hot. They ended last season very hot, so I think they want to keep that momentum up. I'm going to pick them to win this game by 17 points. I know this is a very trendy pick, Nick, and Vanderbilt will probably hang in there and cover the spread. I just think Virginia Tech is too good for a defense. It was very poor in a roster that's just not very good across the board.
This is an extremely trendy pick that I've seen all over the place, and for the life of me, I can't really figure out exactly why people love this so much. I don't particularly get it. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I just don't think Vanderbilt will be competitive here against a Tech team that has a lot going for them. This is a team that's a very exciting team that really has a strong offense led by Kieran Drons, who's a really strong quarterback, really good on the ground as well. I like what they can do with him. They found a playbook that works for him really well. They found a way to make it work for him. Very talented quarterback, Daquan Felton, Ollie Jennings, Jalen Lane are all incredible wide receivers that he can target. I like the offensive line, a solid unit, nice tight end play with Nick Gallo as well. The defense, I think, is really solid. Antoine Powell-Ryland is a really physical player coming off the edge, plus Cole Nelson partnered him on the other side. The interior, they went and attacked it on the portal. That was a weak spot for them. They got good players. Kevin Gillum is a really solid add at right defensive tackle. Sam Brunfield at linebacker was a really good add as well. Jalen Storham as well was a solid piece in the secondary, plus some other players. And Moose Phillips is a good player. Dorian Strong is a very consistently strong player at cornerback. When you look at Vanderbilt, yes, they're an SEC team. Yes, this is in Nashville, so it is a home game for them. But I just don't think Vanderbilt has enough on offense or defense to be competitive in this game. You highlighted some of the issues they had on offense last year, despite having a really talented wide receiving room. A lot of those talented players are gone, and now Diego Pavia has to work with a weaker room around him. The running back room is very young and very shallow, so a lot of question marks there, certainly for me. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, there are some decent names. I think C.J. Taylor is not a bad senior leader. Devin Lee at defensive tackle, solid. Miles Capers, he had some successes in the past. Brian Longwell as well is not a bad player at linebacker, hoping to step up, but I just don't trust this Vanderbilt team to be super competitive in this game. I have like a 35-17 score, something like that, where I think it's going to be a bit of a later push for Tech to cover that 13 points. I like them to cover in this game, though. I just don't think that Vanderbilt will be able to keep it competitive for 4 quarters. Although, Clark Leah is not a bad coach, just a very limited resources to work with. I'm very high on Virginia Tech. Has me leaning towards the Hokies.
Now moving to the mid-afternoon 3:30 slate. Of course, going down in Gainesville, Florida, and Miami. This is a game that obviously the loser doesn't want to lose because it's going to be a very tough start to the year. And even though this extended playoff is great, I mean, you might be talking about people's jobs come the end of the season, Nick. So obviously this is not great for whoever loses this contest. And, we already broke this one down in full, so we'll kind of keep it short and sweet. The Miami they're going to look to overpower with a physical ground game led by the newly acquired Damian Martinez, of course, this passing attack. So likely just going to occupy short the intermediate game. They have some strong hands, guys, especially in Xavier Restrepo, who's going to get, I think, 15 targets in this game. Pass rush won't likely cause too much disruption for the Gators, so they should have some time, and I think the Florida secondary will play much better, especially that corner and Jason Marshall and Devin Moore. This is a secondary gave up a lot of big plays last year, though, so they're certainly going to have to be more in touch than they were last year. Jordan Castell at safety is a big-time playmaker for them. Florida heavily revamped in the trenches. Even though I really have concerns about the edge rushing department, the interior and overall guys that can step up against the run. I certainly think they've done a great job there. Cameron Jackson, Caleb Banks, Joey Slackman, to name a few. I think it's a much deeper unit than people are given credit for. And of course, on the other side, a team that a lot of people are aware of as being deep, the Miami defensive line. Akeem Mesidor is back from an injury. That's big news. Ruben Bain was a big breakout star in his absence. They added Tyler Barron as well. Incredibly deep edge unit. They also had some nice size in the portal and guys like C.J. Clark and Simeon Barrow on the interior. So for the Gators, it's going to be hard for them to run the ball, and Montrell Johnson's likely not going to be 100% if he plays at all. So this is going to be a pass-heavy game for the Gators, Nick, and I think they're comfortable there because Mertz was second in the SEC in pass attempts per game. He was pretty good last season. I mean, over 70% completion rating, only a couple of picks. He's going to get a long leash in this game. They have plenty of playmakers as well, led by Eugene Wilson. They added Elijah Badger in the portal, Shamiri Dyke from Wisconsin. This is a very good receiving room. The secondary, I'm very concerned about, especially with the departure of both safeties. I think they're going to win deep a few times and convert plays at the sticks. Really expecting, again, a strong effort from the passing attack. The defensive line's very nasty, though, and even though the Gators have a mix of veterans and some youthful talent on the offensive line, that will eventually, I think, be pretty good for them. They got to win up front often because this is a defensive line that is no joke, Nick. Mertz has to play an elite game here.
This is a game that's a very interesting matchup here. I'm also taking Florida to win this game. They won 33 straight home openers, a very interesting statistic when you look at that. This team plays really well in home openers. Yes, they played a lot of bad teams in those games, but that's still a very impressive stat when you look at it. This is a game that's got a lot riding on it in the state of Florida. These are two teams that have, Florida has extreme expectations to finally get over that hump, but an incredibly tough schedule for Billy Napier and company. Meanwhile, down there in Miami, they want to be in the playoff with the expanded playoff. They've disappointed so far in Mario Cristobal, and they have a lot to figure out. I like Florida in this game. I think Florida's going to be able to throw the ball with a lot of success. They won't be able to run the ball very effectively, like you alluded to, based off what this Miami defensive line has. I like Cam Ward. I like the Damian Martinez ad. I just think it's going to take some time for these guys to work together and fully gel. Xavier Restrepo, obviously, is an incredibly talented wide receiver for Ward to throw to, and the offensive line is much better than he had his previous two stops, which should benefit him. The Canes defensive line is a very strong and physical unit, which I do like, and I think is a nice matchup advantage against an offensive line for Florida that has some question marks for me. I just think that with Graham Mertz, who's very accurate, he'll be able to put the ball where he wants to. That atmosphere is no joke down there in the swamp. I've been to a game there. It's extremely loud and tough to deal with on the field. I think when you have a team that's inexperienced, has not played together, mostly Ward and Martinez, as well as a coach that has struggled in the past in coaching some of these high key games that Cristobal has, I think there'll be mistakes late in the game, penalties, things of that nature, maybe a turnover or two that will cost Miami in the end. We've seen Florida in the past upset high-profile teams coming into the swamp that were better than them on paper. We saw that against Utah a few years ago. So I like Florida to get the job done again here. A big statement win for Billy Napier and company.
Another game going down at 3:30. FIU and Indiana, there's no real reason I picked this one other than I thought it would be a good line to analyze it because I'm excited about Kurt Cignetti and what he brings for the Hoosiers. So we're going to talk about it. 20.5 in favor of IU. FIU, 13 starters are back for them. Looking at the Indiana offense against that defense, it's a revamped unit. Some good upside in the passing game of Curtis Rourke. They have some great receivers, Donovan McCulley, Elijah Surratt, Miles Cross. They're going up against a secondary that does get back both starting cornerbacks and starting safety C.J. Christian. It was still the 100th pass defense. The run D was even worse, though, 124th in FBS. And, of course, they lose their top run defensive assets in guys like Donovan Manuel and Jordan Girard up front. IU, on the other hand, they have a completely revamped offensive line that should include some added physicality, pretty deep running back room. And, of course, Rourke, his legs are pretty stout as well. Guys like Justice Ellison, Kalen Black, Tyson Lawton, a duo that comes over from JMU. So a very deep running back room here. Plenty of guys are going to want to get on the field. On the other side of the tape, FIU, 117th in scoring offense, 113th in yards. They do get back a pretty good running back in Shamari Lawrence. He and Keyshawn Owens both had 450 yards. Rushing attack only saw 90 yards per contest, though, which was 126 in FBS. They have a true sophomore quarterback, Keon Jennings, had 11 interceptions, 11 touchdowns, 58% completion rating, so he certainly wasn't all that great. Chris Jennings, of course, high-end pass catcher, they lose there. They get back the next two in Dean Patterson and Eric Rivers, though. They get back three starters on the O-line. It was a very poor unit, though, Nick. And I have my concerns this year in terms of, Indiana's defense. I think that they have a lot of transfers in this year. They're probably not going to be all that stout. But this is a team in FIU. They lost 7 games by double figures. IU, of course, barely beat Akron in like 4 overtimes. But this is a much different program right now at this moment in time. 21 points, certainly a large margin, but I think a 35-10 type victory is certainly in store. Nick, obviously an interesting line we're talking about here, but this is where you can make money. Looking at games like this that people aren't really going to be talking about too much, I have Indiana covering a lofty spread.
I'm following the same sort of wavelength as you. I have Indiana 38-10 in this one. I kind of exactly feel the same way you do. Yes, there are some issues with the Indiana defense. I look at the depth chart, only three returning three returning players, period. That is a lot of different transfer players. A lot of guys are plugging in from various different programs, a lot of them JMU guys, other different pieces. The offense, they plug in Curtis Rourke, who I really do like if he can stay fully healthy. I think he's a really incredibly talented quarterback that can really make things happen with his legs, also can throw the ball. Nice additions at wide receiver as well. Elijah Starrett and Miles Price are two solid pieces. Justin Ellison at running back is a really good add for this team. I think Indiana's heading in the right direction. This Cincinnati hire was a really good one. I do worry about the defense later in the season, but I think against a team at FIU that I'm not particularly high on, a team that wasn't very good last year at their level, I really don't worry too much about this. I think this is a game where you kind of look at it, and yes, it's a lofty spread. Three touchdowns is certainly a lot, but a home game, first game of the season, first game of a new era under a head coach, you want to go out there and set an early tone. You want to put on a show for the fans and show that you mean business. I like that new coach bounce. I like this Indiana team to go up early, run away with this one, put some points on the board. The defense to play a pretty decent day, one of their better days of the season probably, and put up a nice score. Like I said, 38-10. I think this is a game. I won't be personally watching this game, but I'll be keeping a close eye on it to see how it unfolds. I do think there's a lot of interesting stories with Indiana this year.
Another one of those games that not many people probably care about, but there's some certain, upside in terms of betting. Ohio, Syracuse, new look orange team facing the Bobcats that have always been very stout. Fourth nationally in defense last year. Also had the fifth fewest plays in FBS, so they weren't always on the field. Bradley Weaver, phenomenal pass rusher. The trend shows the defense will be quite poor this season. They were good in 2020, poor the 2 years following, great this past season, and they only returned 5 starters with the loss of numerous key impact performers, so they're likely in store for a step back. The offense for Ohio, they were great in the bowl game versus a very bad defense with a bunch of deep string players. Parker Navarro, he's going to be the full-time quarterback now. Ricky Hunt was elite in that bowl, 115 yards, 4 touchdowns. Top 7 pass catchers are departing, though, for Ohio. Top 3 rushers are also gone, outside of the aforementioned Hunt. So lots of turnover on this side of the ball. Only 2 returning starters up front at center and at right guard. Playing a middle of the pack group of power forward defense, that is, and an offense that will look to open things up a good bit, led by Kyle McCord. LaQuint Allen's a tremendous back. Aronde Gadsden's a very forgotten player. Guys like Z Haynes and Jackson Meeks, people are excited for. I think they're going to win this game convincingly, 42-20. Are we just getting caught up in the hype of Syracuse, Nick, because this is a team we like to root for? Or do you think this is lofty for them to be able to cover a 17 to 18-point line?
Speaking of another team that has a new coach bounce, new expectations early on, hoping to set the tone very early, that's Syracuse. It's a team that some people are extremely high on, myself and yourself included. Yes, we both do like this team personally. We do have some ties to it. I have, a couple ties to it being from New York. You just tend to like to follow them because the Orange are a fun team and you like to support what they do up there in upstate New York. But I think this is a team that does have a lot of high expectations and a really talented roster. I think Kyle McCord, people are not realizing how good of an ad this is for Syracuse. He is still an incredibly talented quarterback. I know it didn't work at Ohio State. He kind of was a scapegoat. But I think people are just forgetting that he is so talented and really can be that guy. He's been in college football for a while. He's comfortable. He's played a full season under his belt. He looked really good at 95% of that year. Yes, he had that pick against Michigan that cost them, and that's the immediate thing that they want to scapegoat and run him out of town. But that's a tough environment in Columbus. I think he found a more chill, lax environment for him to be comfortable, love his football, and he doesn't have a bad wide receiver room to throw to either. Amarni Hatcher, Zede Haynes are really two talented players. Aronde Gadsden, when he's fully healthy, he's an incredible tight end. I like what this offensive line has, a solid unit. The defense does worry me for Syracuse, and if you want to shy away from this, if you think Ohio's going to cover, it's probably because of the defense making a mistake or two and lapsing a little bit late in the game. Marlon Wax, I like him at linebacker. Derek McDonald, another solid piece. Deuce Chestnut returns, after not finding success transferring away from the program, a really talented player. Fadil Diggs, I think it was a solid add. Deion Wilson, I like him as well, coming off that left side, a strong left side. I like Syracuse this one. I have them at 35-10 over the Ohio Bobcats, who are a solid team in the MAC. I think they're a team that people are kind of sleeping on the MAC, not getting a whole lot of love. in terms of the preseason rankings in the MAC. A lot of people have the other teams in that conference dominating, like Toledo, Miami, and Western Michigan getting a lot of love in that conference in the preseason. I do think that Parker Navarro is a solid quarterback. We saw him in the bowl game. He was good enough. Chase Hendricks is not a bad young wide receiver. Rodney Harris as well is not a bad young wide receiver. Ricky Hunt's a solid back who has some good experience as well. The defense has some decent pieces, nothing that will blow you away. I like Syracuse this one. I think they will make a statement and put up some points early on, but that's certainly a game to keep an eye on. This one might be close and come down to the wire if you're looking at the spread.
Now looking at the final game we'll discuss, Colorado State and Texas. 32.5. This is an interesting line. The Rams have a good quarterback, Braden Fowler-Nicholsy, and of course an elite receiver in Torrey Horton. They have a few good players up front. Biggest thing here is they're facing nastiness in the trenches, and obviously that's the biggest question is, do you think really Texas will, dominate in the trenches? Yes. Will they run up the score? Maybe not. This is a Colorado State D that wasn't awful last year. Horns never did run up the score last year. 37-10 over Rice, 31-10 on Wyoming. So I think I'm going to take a shot here as the Horns are breaking in some new weapons at all different spots on this offense. Great O-line at least. Quinn Ewers, of course, he's another one of those veterans coming back. And the Horns secondary is less than stellar. I think that's probably the weakest positional group on this roster. High volume passing attack for Colorado State. Should do enough to keep this within range. 45-14 final, the prediction for me, which squeaks out a cover, Nick. That's all that matters. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Colorado State will cover this one as well. I actually think I have a bit closer of a score than you do. I have 42-20 UT win. We've seen Texas struggle to cover these lofty spreads against the weaker opponents like you listed there, Rice and Wyoming last year. I don't think Sark wants to really run up the score against some of these opponents early on. Also, Colorado State, they're no slouch. They hung around last year with some good teams, and they have a decent enough offense, I think, to get some points against the Texas defense that may not be fully putting their effort in later in the game. I like some of the defensive pieces as well for Colorado State. Nothing crazy that's jumping off the page. I do more think that the offense has a bit of interesting pieces. Troy Horton and Dylan Godfrey are two really talented players that are veterans at this moment in time. I like the offensive line that has some experience for Colorado State as well. Texas is an incredible team. I think they're going to be really strong this year, one of the best in the SEC. I think this is a game where they're not really fully focused on running up the score. Again, like I said, we've seen that in the past. Kind of just taking a shot in the dark here, but I think this makes sense for me to have Colorado State cover this game. It's a pretty lofty spread, and I don't really see them putting up 50, 60 points and getting an absolute blowout. And I also don't see the defense for Texas shutting this Colorado State offense out. I think they'll get some momentum and get some points late in the game.
Now looking at the nightcap, Western Kentucky, Alabama, 31.5. Familiar foe when TJ Finley takes over for Western Kentucky. This is a team under Tyson Helton that typically has a pretty stout passing attack, and I think that will be the case this year. This is a team, though, that played Ohio State last year, got absolutely demolished, giving up 62 points, didn't really do much to hang in there, despite having a better quarterback and a better supporting cast and all that. So I think Western Kentucky, this is always a team that'll compete in the CUSA. They're going to win 8-9 games probably this year. Run game's not going to provide much because this is an air raid attack. And the defensive side of the ball, kind of the middle-of-the-road unit. Alabama, obviously, with Kalen DeBoer. They got a lot of new guys to break in. Jalen Milroe, how will he look in this new scheme? They're looking to find out who will be the new playmakers, the go-to ones, that is, in their supporting cast. Of course, the offensive line returns plenty of experience, and they have great size as well. And the defense is still littered with complete 5 stars. A bit of a sloppy analysis right there, I guess you could say, Nick, but I just don't think that Western Kentucky's going to be able to cover. I mean, this is a team in Alabama. I mean, you've seen it when they played the Mike Leach offenses. This does not faze them one bit. Obviously, Nick Saban's not in there coaching up the defense anymore. I don't think it really matters. When you have athletic ability going against this scheme like that, and there's that much of a discrepancy in the talent, it's going to be pretty easy to slow down. They're going to send a lot of blitzes, and I think that's just going to be too much for Western Kentucky to be able to find much success. Alabama, I think they're going to win this game like 56-10 or something like that. I think it's going to be a pretty wide margin. 31 seems incredibly low. Do you think that's fair? Which way are you leaning on this one? Where Alabama covering with ease?
No pick for me on this one as an Alabama alum, but I am very interested to see how the first game of this new era of Kalen DeBoer looks in Tuscaloosa. I think you made a lot of fair points here. Alabama will look to put on a show early on as they kick off this new era, and I don't blame them. You want to show the fans that they mean business still, and I think the Kalen DeBoer hire was a phenomenal hire. I absolutely love the hire. I think it makes a ton of sense for this program, a ton of sense for where this direction is going right now with replacing Nick Saban, who is obviously a legendary head coach that is going to be tough to replace. I like this offense put up a lot of points here. I like this offense to be very effective early on. I think that Jalen Miller will look just fine in this. The defense is going to be very strong, in my opinion. I think the defense is still phenomenal in Tuscaloosa. They return so much talent. I know they lost Caleb Downs, which was a tough loss and breaks my heart still, but I think the defense will still be really good. I like the coaching they brought in. The defensive coordinator, previously a head coach at South Alabama, was an incredible hire. Makes a lot of sense for me. I love that hire a lot. 31.5 is a lofty point spread, but we've seen Alabama in the past cover some of these, and also I think Kalen DeBoer, this is a new era for him. He's going to want to put up a lot of points and make a statement. Prime time and Bryant-Denny's Saturday night. They got a night game kick off the season, which I absolutely love as an Alabama fan. I'm excited to see what this looks like. I'll be obviously tuned in, breaking down every single little last play that happens, as this is my alma mater and my favorite team. I'm excited to see what happens here. I think you make a lot of fair analysis. I think your pick makes a lot of sense.
Now, looking at the game of the week, college game days in town, College Station, Texas A&M, Notre Dame. Another game we broke down in full, so we'll kind of keep it sweet. For the Notre Dame offense, Riley Leonard comes over, has much better weapons now, has never shown great urge, though, in tough matchups through the air. I think his legs will be used plenty in this game. Of course, Jeremiah Love, Darian Price, very good running back room, good downfield passing game last year. How will this offense operate without that same effect? Most likely because Hartman's not in the building. Injuries have significantly hampered the left tackle spots. Looks like they're going to roll with a true freshman. And they have an elite matchup, Nick, at least the edge rushers do, in terms of the opportunity to feast. Nick Scorchon, Cassius Howell, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner. I mean, there's some great players on this defensive line that I think they might just eat here. Running backs will need to be big in pass pro, may even need to provide some chip boxing. The other side of the ball, Connor Wigman, of course. He's a player we barely saw, but he's a highly talented player. Facing a secondary, it's very good. Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison. I mean, these guys are going to be tough to crack. They have a lot of skills in terms of being able to create turnovers. Run game, winning towards the boundary is going to be key because the defensive end spot for Indy, it's not all that polished. On the interior, though, Howard Cross, Riley Mills, one of the best duos in the country. But they're also facing a pretty young linebacking group that could certainly get caught out of place against an A&M offensive line that does have a lot of size, and you're certainly hoping they progress better than they did under Jimbo Fisher. And they were awful in terms of running the ball versus good opponents. Ruben Owens not playing, obviously, this year with an injury. Not worried, Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels. Still a very talented running back room for the Aggies. Passing game will probably be leaned on heavy a good bit. Just protect the ball and avoid being inept, and I think they can play the field position game, and you'll be able to find some deep shots with what is their own very good wide receiver core, led by guys like Moose Muhammad and Noah Thomas. And I think Riley Leonard's just going to struggle in this game, Nick. I'm a fan of his. I thought he was good at Duke, but I think in this type of competition, he's just not going to fare very well in this game. I think Mike Denbrock's going to do some big things, though, in terms of progression for Leonard. But you're not going to see it in this game, Nick. I think the Aggies win this one. They're going to cover by a couple of points. They'll still be close. Lower scoring affair. Aggies on top.
You and I disagree on this one. I have Notre Dame winning this one. I think Riley Leonard is going to have a good game. I think his offense is going to look good under him. They're going to be able to throw the ball and find themselves in a good position attacking that middle of the defense that is a bit of a weakness for Texas A&M. I like what they have on offense here. I think this is a decent Notre Dame offense. It's a lot better than some people give it credit for. I do think Riley Leonard was an incredible add. Really strong legs on him. Really good runner. Product out of Mobile, Alabama. I really like what he can do. I think Bo Collins was a decent add for Notre Dame. He can finally hit to that high level that we expected of him. Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse are two talented players. Plus Mitchell Evans is a really good tight end. Jeremiah Love and Jordan Price. They're not bad running backs. They won't have a lot of success against this incredible A&M defensive line. And I certainly worry about the offensive line for Notre Dame. I think it's a weak unit, obviously, with the injuries and the issues. Certainly left tackle. I like the defensive line for Notre Dame as well. I think R.J. Oben was an incredible add from Duke. Howard Cross, Riley Mills, and Jordan Bethrow are all really talented players. Jack Kaiser is a good leader at linebacker. Derek Bowen, he's got to step up and be strong as a sophomore. The secondary, I like what they have. Xavier Watts, Christian Gray, two really talented players, plus Benjamin Morrison, a good defensive leader. I like this Notre Dame team to go in and get a big statement win. For them, the pathway is pretty clear. If they win this game, the pathway to the college football playoff is extremely clear for Marcus Freeman and company. This would be a huge statement win going on the road to Aggie Land, a tough place to play. I like the hire for Duke. I think Mike Elko is an incredible coach. I just don't think it's going to work out this game because Connor Wegman, I haven't seen enough of him to be fully confident. The running back room I worry about a little bit as well. Plus the wide receiving room, I have some question marks about how productive they're going to be in this game. I think they'll figure it out throughout the season. I worry about that linebacking core for A&M. Two true sophomores penciled in to start in this game, and most likely, unless Solomon DeShields gets in, who is a transfer. But if you're running two true sophomores in Sanford and York, I worry about that especially. I think you'll be able to pick that apart and be a big advantage for Notre Dame. I like the Fighting Irish in this one.
Now looking at an interesting contest as well, close line, 2.5 now in favor of Houston as UNLV comes to town. Team that was very good last year. And it starts with Ricky White and Jacob DeJesus, two very good receivers, especially Ricky White, who is one of the nation's best. Right now, the starting quarterback is a complete mystery. Jaden Maeva, of course, transfers to USC. They're going to keep this a secret until game day. I don't know if it really matters. Matthew Slucka comes over from Holly Cross. You have a couple of guys in the program that have been here for a few years. Malik Williams, that is. He comes over from Campbell. So you got some guys from the FCS level coming over here. Going to make their first FBS start despite a lot of experience. On the road at Houston, Willie Fritz's debut. Again, a very close line. The defense for UNLV, it was all right last year, but I picked them to lose pretty badly to Boise State in the conference championship games. I thought they would just struggle big time to defend the run, and they were no good in that contest. And I think here, you're going against the Houston offense. They're certainly less than stellar in their own right. I don't think they're going to put up 300 yards like Boise did. I think they'll be well. I think Donovan Smith is a very good quarterback. He's looking to boost his draft stock this year, and he can certainly do that to a good tone. Parker Jenkins, a true sophomore at running back, is a player that's going to get a lot of touches. And in the wide receiver room, it's kind of makeshift, a lot of different transfers that are actually quite solid players on top of a nice returning Joseph Manjack. So I think there's going to be too much offense here, more of a higher scoring contest, Nick. I think UNLV is a good ball club, but in terms of what they have at quarterback, not all that confident in it. While on the other side, they have a great playmaker in Smith who's going to win this game by himself if he has to. 2.5, take him to cover. I think it will be a close affair, though, with a lot of points and a lot of up and down moments. Give me the Cougars to start 1-0.
I like the Cougars to start 1-0 as well. I have them winning 42-32, a high-scoring affair. There'll be a lot of points in this game. A lot of question marks for both these teams. These are two exciting teams at the Group of 5 level that I think could really be involved in their conference. Houston's now as a Big 12 program. UNLV, a Group of 5 team. Houston making the jump to the Big 12. What are they going to look in the Big 12 this year? I don't think they're going to be a very good team in that conference, but I do think UNLV is a very interesting team out in the Mountain West that looks to be wide open. Nevada shook things up when they won early on, or played competitively with SMU and kind of changed the narrative that they were going to be a bottom feeder in that conference. When you look at what they have at UNLV, we don't know who's going to be a quarterback. Obviously, that's very interesting. Matthew Solka, I think, should be the guy that starts. I'm excited to see what he looks like. Casey Kane was a really solid add out of the portal. Jacob DeJesus and Ricky White are two really talented wide receivers that this offense returns. I like what they have at tight end as well. I think it's a decent player. The defense has some question marks. The defense got run over at times last year. I think this will be a high-scoring game, so I worry about what the defense can do. When you look at Houston, there's a lot of question marks with that team as well. They won't be very competitive in the conference, but I think they're going to win this game. I like what Willie Fritz can do in this game, particularly. I think Donovan Smith's a really solid quarterback. The wide receiver room's not bad. The running back room, Parker Jenkins, a younger player who's not bad. A lot of transfers in the defense, a new-look defense, which is why I think they'll give up 32 points. This should be a high-scoring affair. I think I love the over in this game. If you're looking to throw some action on the over-under, the line's at 54.5. I still think they will clear that pretty easily. This should be a high-scoring, fun, back-and-forth affair on FS1 on Saturday night if you want to tune into that.
Wraps up the games for Saturday. But that doesn't mean the week's over, Nick. We still have 2 games to go down. Ranked matchup out in Vegas, LSU, USC. Seems like that LSU offensive line could be in line to overwhelm the Trojans, who were very bad against the run last year. Certainly interested to see what improvements Eric Henderson has delivered, led by Bear Alexander. That's certainly one topic. Obviously, you have Garrett Nussmeier and Miller Moss, 2 quarterbacks that have waited their turn in their respective programs, ready to make massive improvements for their respective ball clubs this season, even make a push for the Heisman. Moss coming off a great bowl game. So was Nussmeier as well. Moss is obviously being more staggering. As a USC fan, no pick for me. I'll be in attendance for this one, Nick. Likely going to be a high-scoring affair between 2 teams that really good on offense. They had 2 Heisman Trophy winners at quarterback, but abundantly disappointed on defense. So very interesting how these teams have the exact same storyline. And they also have 2 head coaches that always get called overrated. So, this is identical as it comes, Nick. You have the Trojans winning outright. And as an Alabama alum, I would hope to think that has nothing to do with maybe being a little negative towards LSU to kick off the season. But you have good reasons, including Brian Kelly's disappointments, typically in Week 1.
I do have USC winning this game 37-30, and some of those disappointments in Week 1 have been, sitting on my mind and led me to go with this pick. Brian Kelly has lost 2 in a row at LSU to Florida State kick off the season. Lost it on a missed extra point in New Orleans 2 years ago. Lost it in a bit of a blowout fashion last year in Orlando, and then the year prior to that, his last opening game at Notre Dame against Florida State in Tallahassee. That Florida State team was absolutely horrendous. They ended up losing to an FCS JSU team not too long after that, and they kept it extremely close, took it to overtime, and Notre Dame had to escape a Florida State team on that Sunday night. Those are 3 straight Sunday night games where Brian Kelly has absolutely struggled. His teams have not played well. certainly factoring into my decision. I'm kind of a fan of some of those, weird sort of statistics when you look at that statistical outliers. I do like what LSU has in offense. I think this offense is phenomenal with Garrett Nussmeier leading the way. I worry about their wide receiver room, a bit of a weaker unit. Obviously, when you lose two incredibly high-end NFL draft talents, that's going to happen. But I do think they'll figure it out throughout the season. The running back room, I think, is very shallow and could cost them over time. Certainly, if they want to be very productive in this game, they're going to have to run the ball early on behind an incredibly stout offensive line, the nation's best offensive line. USC, I think the offense is also phenomenal. Miller Moss, I think, is an incredible player. A sleeper for the Heisman, in my opinion, a guy that you could plug in and play. We've seen what Lincoln Riley's done with his various quarterbacks who have gone on to be successful in college and the NFL. So clearly, why not, Miller Moss? He's a guy that's been sitting in the program. He looks primed to be the next star out of USC. I think he can make a run at the Heisman, like I just said, a really talented player that has a lot to go for him. A younger wide receiver room for them as well, but guys that got some experience last year. Some nice speed with Zachariah Branch, who I think will have a big day as well out there in Vegas. I like the offensive line to be a bit stronger in this game for USC figured out, whereas the defenses, these are two horrendous defenses last year that have a lot of question marks. LSU, obviously, they have a huge impact playmaker on the defensive side of the ball in Harold Perkins. But what's he going to look like this year? Brian Kelly's kind of moved him around a whole bunch, hasn't really been able to settle on what his natural position is. You and I both think he should be a full-time linebacker. If he's got to play off the edge, though, I think that hurts that defense overall. Defensive line, I don't know how they're going to look this year, considering they were extremely talented last year, sent some guys to the NFL, and were not very good at all. Can they be very productive this year? The secondary is also iffy, facing a tough challenge. USC's defense, yes, tons of question marks, certainly, but I think the defensive line will be better under new coaching. I think Bear Alexander's in line for a pretty solid season. They've returned some decent pieces. The linebacking core, I think, should be better as well. The secondary made some strong portal additions. I like USC to make a big move here. I think people are sleeping on this team. I think this team has a lot of potential, and they're not getting enough love in the grand scheme of college football. I think they go out there and shock LSU week 1 and make a statement.
And to wrap things up, Florida State, Boston College, 17-point line. Obviously, the Noles, disappointing loss to start the year in Dublin. Not that shocked because we're not all that high on Florida State, Nick. I think they're going to cover this game, though, just because they are disappointed with the loss, and they were just very poor in the trenches. This is a very good defensive line. We thought they'd be, worse this year against the run, but they're a lot better than what we saw last week, where they were just flat out up-muscled by a middle-of-the-pack offensive line. Florida State, has Patrick Payton, who did relatively nothing last week. Guys like Joshua Farmer and Darrell Jackson on the interior, much more capable of what they provided in week 1, going against a rushing attack. An offense really from Boston College that gave them a lot of headaches last year. Implement Bill O'Brien. Trayshawn Ward joins Thomas Castellanos, who was a quarterback who made a lot of mistakes last year, also provided a lot of explosive plays. The addition of Jaden McGowan and Jerron Bradley for the receiving room is very important. I think they still have a relatively good offensive line. The defensive side of the ball, though, not really all that great. They're one of the worst in terms of creating negative plays, especially with their pass rush. The secondary, they do lose their best player, who was the only one that really provided negative plays in terms of ball skills, that being Elijah Jones, had 5 of the team's 8 interceptions. So even though we don't think Florida State's all that good, they are coming off a loss. I think they're going to have a big bounce back here. So I definitely think they have much more than they provided last week. DJ Uyunglele, of course, a guy who we don't think is either, that great. But they have enough here to overwhelm Boston College, Nick. They should be able to get back on track. This game was incredibly close last year. They should have lost the game, quite frankly, to the Eagles. Obviously, it's pretty bold to pick Florida State after everything I just said to cover in this game. I think they're due for a bounce back, though. I think you're probably going to take a cover, though, Nick, which would, I think, be kind of embarrassing if this is a 2-score game or less.
I think, Boston College is going to cover this game. I think this is a game that has Boston College covering written all over it. Last year, Florida State won 31-29. Barely hanging on against a Boston College team that wasn't very good. Yes, I know that was on the road, and this one is in Tallahassee, which does add a little bit to this and makes this more likely for Florida State to cover. But I like BC to cover in this game. Florida State looked absolutely horrendous against Georgia Tech. That team, you and I were not high on them, but man, they disappointed way more than I ever thought they could. They looked absolutely completely out of sync. The play calling made no sense. DJ looked totally uncomfortable except for one drive in the fourth quarter. Overall, just a complete mess out there in Dublin, Ireland. You might write that as a one-off. You could say what you want about it. I think it might be a greater trend in the wrong way for this Florida State team. I'm concerned about them already. Red flags already flying in my head. This is a BC team that I think actually has some juice this year. I think this is a team that has some potential for success with Castellanos at quarterback, who's an incredibly talented runner. I think the Bill O'Brien hire was a really solid hire. They did the best they could given the situation they found themselves in with their coach bolting so late in the cycle. This team won a bowl game last year, BC. This is a team that's not a bad team on paper, has some decent pieces. The defense does worry me, but I think they could win this game, or Florida State's going to win this game by like 7-10 points, giving BC the cover on the road. road, making those Florida State fans uneasy late in the game. If I'm a Florida State fan, I'm not very happy right now with what's going on. I'm not very happy at all with the direction this program looks to be going this season after a tough loss. Week 1, I think alarm bells should already be sounding down there in Tallahassee. I think they're going to struggle against this BC team and continue to be a trend for this Florida State team that's looking to disappoint this year.
Looks like that line's now down to 15.5 on BetMGM. It's going to be it for today's episode. Nick, as always, appreciate you joining me. Massive week 1 in store. It's awesome to be able to get in the lab and dissect these games. We'll check our results at the end of the week. It's probably going to be way off.
Anytime I will get out my notebook and start breaking down results, writing down my crazy scribbles of my covers, my spreads, things like that, that's how I know we're absolutely locked in and back for college football season. Breaking out that notebook was so fun today. I'm excited to get back after this. I think this is an incredible week of slate of college football. Starts Thursday with some great matchups, and then you roll into Saturday with some incredible games, and Sunday and Monday. Week 1 is truly special as you play out games across a couple of day period, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Love college football. Love that we're back. Week 0 was a great teaser. Now the show begins. Can't wait to see how these teams look on Saturday.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.